Hello, bonjour. Welcome to my interview series, Tea with Me, where I talk to creatives from around the world. Today, I'm chatting with La Carmina, a travel blogger, author, and TV presenter from Vancouver, Canada, who grew up in the goth subculture and now explores the world. She is an expert in so many things: fashion, design, food, clubbing, but especially the scene in Japan. So we're going to talk about that today. Let's go. La Carmina, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining me for some tea over a video chat.
Thank you.
I know it's a busy season being coming up to Halloween, and you've got a big trip to Japan for
Mhm.
Halloween coming up that I want to talk about. But first, I want to ask about your tea, what you're drinking tonight, and what mug you have.
Okay. So I have a mug with Miffy, my favorite cute character. Anyone that follows me knows I'm really a Miffy fan. And we have green tea in here. So for the Japanese theme, I thought the green tea kombucha blend by Yogi Tea would be appropriate.
I also tried to go on theme. I picked out from my Mariage Frère shelf, which is my favorite French tea company. They do a Sakura Blossom blend every year. This one is from a few years ago now when I was last there. And I've put it in this sort of danger skull and crossbones mug because I think we may end up talking about the apocalypse as this goes on.
Ooh, nice.
um, why don't we start with your background? You're one of the only people in the travel content world that I know that is an alternative person. What was it that turned you on to weird things when you were growing up?
Well, I think a lot of us have similar stories. People that identify as goth often tell me, just like me, they love spooky things when they were young, when they were kids. I mean, I was always into Halloween and horror movies, and I remember the other kids around me that, oh, afraid of this, or this is too much for me, but I could not get enough. So even as a kid, my favorite things had to do with graveyards and bats and ghost stories. And then getting into my teen years, I found like-minded people in the Gothic subculture. So I started experimenting with the fashion, going to concerts, sneaking into clubs. And I especially was fascinated by the manifestation of the goth scene in Japan because my family's from Asia, so I'm very lucky that I got to travel to Hong Kong and Japan in my teen years and see it firsthand. So from that point, I was hooked.
So, what was your exposure? Was it seeing people on the street? Because I remember hearing about Japanese street style, but of course, I don't read Japanese, and so it was hard for me to find information about it.
Yeah, well, these were the olden days, right? Before the internet had everything. So people couldn't really see these fashions for themselves. There was Fruits magazine, Gothic Lolita Bible, some of the magazines out there, but you couldn't really just log on and find inspiration or get to know the Gothic scene. So I really had to be there firsthand, and it just blew my mind. People were so creative in the way they dressed, in the way that they were passionate about goth, but put their own Japanese twist on it, whether with Japanese accents like kimonos and aspects of the culture, or their own take on the music scene, like Visual Kei, which is a type of glam, heavy metal, hard rock that's very Japanese. And one of the most famous bands, Malsmeser, the lead singer, dressed in Gothic Lolita dresses. So it was just so different from what I saw in Western Goth. And it really spoke to me, especially when I was
Mm.
in my late teens.
Why do you think it spoke to you much more than what you would say was happening in the West?
Ooh, good question. I think I just love the elegance of it. I
Mm.
think at the time in the West, you had a lot of the latex, fishnet, cyber kind of Y2K era type or 2000s goths going on, and that just wasn't really my thing. I loved
Mm.
seeing gothic lolitas in Japan wearing these frilly skirts looking like dark Alice in Wonderland characters with parasols and bonnets. I just thought it was having tea parties. It was a more beautiful and elegant and cute version of goth that I found really resonated with me.
Would you consider yourself a Gothic Lolita? Did you have a phase of that, or were you more observing it?
A bit of both. When I first started my blog, so a lot of people that have been following me since the very beginning, when I first started my La Carmina blog, they'll know that at the time it was all focused on Gothic Lolita fashion and culture in Japan. because that was my passion at the time. And I did dress in the style. I covered the parties. I dove into the subculture in Tokyo, and it was one of the only resources out there that captured the scene. But trends change, people change. I'm not into the really frilly dresses anymore, and I love evolving my style. I've never stuck to one look. I don't always wear traditional gothic. You won't always just see me in black or wearing gothic fashion. I like to mix it up. So over the years, Gothic Lolita kind of waned in Japan, but other things arose, and we'll talk about this later. But I just adapted from focusing on Gothic Lolita visual kei to alternative culture and goth culture all around the world, and then doing travel stories that incorporate this into food writing, travel writing, and TV shows.
How many times have you been to Japan?
More than I can count. So I started going when I was a child and teen with my family. And then later on with the blog, I would spend months at a time in Tokyo. And I'm in Japan for over a month this time in the fall. But for the past 10, 15 years or so, I've always been going to Japan every year or every 2 years, depending if there's a pandemic or what's going on. And it would always be for work. So I would be flown there by Japan Tourism or to work with different companies or to do a TV show or something like that. So fortunately, the most recent trips to Japan have always been for some work excuse. And then I would, of course, stay for longer to see my friends and do Halloween and do all the goth things.
What is Halloween like in Japan?
Oh, it's the best. It's so much fun. So it's very lucky that I got this work trip through Japan Tourism Board that happened to coincide with spooky season. So for the first few weeks, I'll be in Japan, mostly Tokyo, doing all the goth things, going to the parties, supporting my friends that they throw drag shows, they have alternative nights, they do all these artistic events, things to do with underground culture, whether it's body modifications or fetish nights. So I'm so excited to see them and all the creative things that they do. I'm also popping over to Okinawa for the first time. And then the works part itself starts in November, where I'm heading north to Tohoku. And that's the region just north of Tokyo. People may have heard of Fukushima and Sendai. Those are in that region. And I'll be there on a press trip with my photographer and another journalist, and we'll be exploring the food scene. We'll be going to these local restaurants and meeting producers and really diving deep into what makes the culinary scene so exciting north of Tokyo.
Within Tokyo, you mentioned drag, and I've seen that on some of your Instagram video content that have gone viral, and I've seen a little bit about the sort of what goes on in the clubs there. But how would you describe the current culture in these clubs in Japan?
Yeah, well, it's always over the top creativity. I just feel every aspect of Japanese culture is so visual, whether it's traditional festivals or the art scene, then that extends to the goth scene. People go all out with their outfits. They're not just going to put on a black t-shirt and call it a day, but you'll see these extraordinary headdresses, makeup, handmade steampunky things, or whatever it might be. And it just comes out in full force at these gothic events. Halloween is incredible there. People always wonder, oh, do they really celebrate Halloween in Japan? Well, not in the trick-or-treating sense, but you'll see cute decorations everywhere. I mean, cute culture is, Japan loves cute things, so might as well make adorable ghost decorations and bat, products, candies and whatnot, Halloween decor. And then, of course, the Goths will take this holiday and run with it. There will be a bunch of parties that my friends are throwing. One is Casket of Horrors, which is a horror drag event. So all the drag queens have something to do with horror Gothic themes. And I mean, you can expect blood and guts, and it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be bloody amazing. And then my friends do other Gothic events that, again, it's more than just playing music. There's always an artistic element that I really love. And often my friend Mistress Maya, she incorporates Japanese rope tying, shibari, the Japanese bondage. And then I do an artistic performance with, say, an opera singer or a violinist. So often there's almost a classical or musical and an elegant aspect that elevates it above what you might see in a Western club.
For anyone visiting Japan, whether it's their first time or they've been before, and they want to explore outside of Tokyo and find things that are unique and interesting and accessible and affordable, do you have favorite places to recommend?
I would say the Gothic scene is centered in Tokyo, but Osaka and Kobe also have fantastic Gothic attractions, some of which I think are even better because of their niche. So I would encourage people to obviously fly into Tokyo, check out some of my friends' parties. I often post about them, but if you look up Mistress Maya, Midnight Mess, she often has Gothic events. She's been doing it for over 20 years. I mean, she's the OG, and she's so welcoming. She does these beautiful events. My friends at House von Schwartz, if you look up Casket of Horrors, you'll find these horror Gothic drag shows that are also regularly happening in Tokyo to Osaka. Then there's this Bar Midian is run by, it's almost like it's very devilish, like Japanese Satanism. There's a store called Territory that's also like that, and the parties that often happen called Black Veil. So Osaka has a great kind of darker, almost satanic scene. There's absinthe bars, there's hard rock, and then Kobe has a satanic bar as well called Idea. It's spelled Idea, Idea, Idea. So that is a great way to kind of dive into the more darker, occult, satanic elements of goth within Japan.
What advice would you give to someone who's going to Japan for the first time and wants to have this experience, whether it's at Halloween or any time of year, to go to a club and see the goth and alternative culture there? Do you have etiquette tips, or are there things that people can do so that they have the best time?
Hmm. Well, I think a lot of it's common sense, but being respectful with photography, asking before taking photos. It is a pet peeve of mine when someone just shoves a camera in your face and starts taking pictures because you're dressed weird. You know what I mean? So, like, be respectful. Ask people if you can take their photo first. You just show up respectfully with an open mind and a willingness to learn and be humble. And I think that's the best way to approach anything.
How much do you think that Japanese culture has influenced goth subculture around the world? Like, I am not an expert on this scene. I've talked to young people who are way more influenced by anime than any gothic rock music that I grew up listening to. So I feel like a generational shift there.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's absolutely the whole anime, manga, visuals and aesthetics and culture have had an influence. And you see that in cosplay. You see that, Death Note. A lot of people might know Death Note. Misa Amane kind of has the hair like that and the gothic dresses. I mean, people have these reference points now for goths around the world. And it's just so interesting because goth, of course, developed in the West, in London, New York. And then when it came to Japan, it kind of took on its own form. And now that we're so connected with the internet and social media, for good or bad, but the good is that you get a glimpse into goth scenes around the world a lot more easily now. You don't have to just go there. You can see it online. You can follow people in the scene and see instant updates. And it's fascinating to me just how these trends influence each other and how you might see, again, the anime manga influence being the predominant inspiration for especially younger goths now.
Where do you stand on the you have to listen to gothic rock, post-punk, dark wave to be a goth person discussion?
The controversy always, right? I feel so even if you don't listen to it regularly, even if it's not your favorite, because to me, everyone knows my favorite music's disco. So, but even if that's the case, I think you should have an appreciation of it and an understanding of the background. And that even extends to Victorian era or, Gothic literature and history and art and just all these influences that led to the late 70s, early 80s post-punk and early goth era. I feel with anything, whether it's a hobby or a subculture, just having that full understanding and respect shows it deepens the way you get immersed in it and how it becomes part of your life. It's kind of hard for me to just take it at surface level, if that makes sense. Some people, and it's fine, but some people, they just dress gothy or whatever it might be, and they don't really identify as goth. It's just aesthetic. It's just for Instagram or whatever it might be. And so they don't know anything about the bands or any of the influences. And to me, that's a more shallow way of approaching it. I won't judge them for it, but at the same time, I think that's not as deep as you can get to it. And I think that people do sense that. I think if you are reading an article by someone like you or me, I think they can sense that we have that knowledge and appreciation in a way that someone who's just posing and doing the aesthetics does not.
Well, let's hope. Although I don't always get everything right. I certainly heard from a lot of actual Gothic Lolitas when I made my video without really understanding what they were all about. But I love those conversations because I like to learn. So I'm curious, as you've traveled to places as different between like Mexico to Myanmar and met with all different people, do you see any common threads or things that goths and alternative subcultures have in common through these different countries and cultures?
Yeah, it's so fascinating how people have a similar worldview or the things that make them tick, but it often takes on a different cultural lens. You mentioned Mexico, which is a great example because actually, I have here my skull,
More
my skull
skulls.
from Puebla, Mexico, that I just
Beautiful.
got on my recent trip there. So Mexico, of course, has this really rich Day of the Dead history, and just its skull imagery has been around since pre-Hispanic times, so pre-colonial times, and again, it's very goth before you even call it goth. But it's just so great to me how people in somewhere like Mexico can reference their culture and their personal history in a way that connects to their current or modern Gothic manifestation. There's also the witchcraft culture in Mexico that's very distinct. So I think it all connects. It's just so interesting to me how, for example, now in modern day Mexico City, there's a bar called Brujas, and it's run by a coven of witches. So all women that identify as Mexican traditional witches making cocktails and mocktails with like indigenous ingredients that have to do with herbal healing, and the drinks are named after witchy women from around the world. So in a way, they're connecting their own historic witchcraft culture with witches today and goth culture today.
I'm so excited. I'm going to Mexico City soon for the first time in a long time. So I want to go to that bar. I know that you are very interested in style in your own way, but you're also an eco conscious person who is not like I've never seen you really do fast fashion hauls or things like that, which is very popular in this scene. So, what's your sort of style philosophy?
Great question, and something that's really important to me. And you're right, this is something that I've maintained since the very beginning. I've never, so even though I get a lot of offers to feature fast fashion brands and those, Chinese drop shipping companies, paid offers too, but I turn them all down. I'm very choosy with who I work with. And I think part of it's just being drilled from childhood, just through my family. They love fashion. They're from Hong Kong, and some of them are in the fashion business. So there was always a focus on high quality, natural materials, and appreciating that, and curating higher quality pieces as opposed to just grabbing fast fashion. Even when, like I said, even though there's the temptation to feature new outfits all the time, even if they're offered to you for free or you get paid collaborations. A lot of people do unboxings and like, look at all these clothes I have, and that was just never my thing. And I think it was fortunate that wasn't my focus because I diversify. I write about travel, I write about food and design and so many different things. So it's never just about goth fashion. If you aren't boxed into one category, then you don't have to depend on that for income or as your one niche. Yeah, so right now, especially plastic, I'm just trying to not have plastic anything. And like, things that are cotton, things that evolve with the era, with trends. Right now I'm really into the Y2K styles, which they're having a moment. They're coming back. I love it. This is the big pants and the kind of the crop tops and all that. But again, with natural materials. And I do collaborate with designers, with indie designers, Canadian. Like I'm going to do a feature soon with Rudsack. They're a Canadian company. It's a beautiful wool coat. I just did something with Slow Design Studio, also Canadian, and they make all natural fabrics and Gothic styles. So I'm very picky and choosy, but I think that's served me well over the years because people know that they can look to my content and know that I'm not just being paid by some fast fashion company to feature whatever might be the drop of the day.
Yeah, I've been reading more about plastics. It's been quite a few years since I've had a big PVC wardrobe. I do miss it. I liked it. I don't really wear it anymore. Um, I find when I travel or even like when I make these videos, it's like, have I worn this sweater on a video before? I'm like, who cares?
Mhm.
Right? Like, am I going to wear the same clothes like on every trip? It's like, yeah, because I don't have new clothes every single time. I think there's a lot of pressure though on people to constantly have a new outfits of the day and get ready with me and haul videos and all of these things. And I mean, I hope that is going away. I hope that's not something that continues.
I think it is shifting a bit. I think because of the economy or just a more consciousness of spending and of waste and plastics, I think there is more of a shift now. I think capsule wardrobes and curation are and thrifting are having a more of a heyday than they have in the past. But again, it always shifts. And no one's perfect. I don't think it's, I still buy things that, may have plastics in it. And I have clothes in the past. Obviously, if you look at my older photos that are very different from what I have now, but it's a work in progress. And yeah.
Man, I've been reading about microplastics in tea, and that's freaking me out. I mostly drink loose leaf tea, but the ones that come in like bags or that even have like a little tag on them, and you're like, it's like, oh man, it's just everywhere. So
Yeah.
we do what we can, like you say, nobody's perfect, right?
Yeah, exactly. We do what we can.
So you and I've had a chance to meet you in person. You took me around to some places in Vancouver that were really fun and interesting. Tell us a little bit about Vancouver. How would you describe the sort of alternative scene out in Vancouver these days?
Sure. Well, I was born here. I grew up here. Then went away for quite a few years to school in New York and New Haven, and then I would live on and off in Japan. And I also spent quite a bit of time in LA, but came back here. The scene has changed a lot, as I'm sure it has in Toronto and everywhere. I think I don't really go to the Gothic events here, to be honest. There is a great alternative culture. Right now, I think the alternative, like tiny speakeasies and cocktail bar scenes are really great here, especially in the Chinatown area. You have people just experimenting and creating alternative spaces that are really fascinating. There's great design, great experimentation. There are also hell temples. And again, remember I mentioned how in Mexico you might incorporate Day of the Dead culture? Well, in Japan, especially in Osaka, you can go to a Buddhist hell temple where it's you get to experience going into the Buddhist underworld where there are demons with red faces. People may know the red demon emojis on your phone. You see those demons oni around. They're not Western devils, right? But they just have the similar characteristics. So that becomes a part of Japanese Goth. You incorporate your own folklore and rich traditions of these oni and demons and other ghosts and spirits, yokai monsters. There are big parades of yokai, so these traditional Japanese spirits. Again, it's not Halloween, it's not Western Goth, but it's so goth. It's so fun.
When do these parades happen?
They happen different times of the year, but usually around Halloween. My favorite one in Tokyo, it's in Koenji, and it's happening this year on October 25th, but usually it's just right before Halloween. There's also a big one in Kyoto around the same time, and sometimes they happen around Obon, which is earlier in the summer, the Ghost Festival.
What's the Ghost Festival?
Ooh, that's when it's a Asian thing where it's like the spirits of the dead, and it's kind of like Day of the Dead. They come back. It's usually around late August, something like that. And you might have rituals and offerings for your ancestors. There's stories and celebrations and festivals that have to do with this. So tied to Buddhist culture, of course. Again, very interesting how you might incorporate elements of Shinto or Buddhism within goth and how it's expressed in Japan.
So this has been really fun talking about clubs and travel, but I also know from talking to you that you think the end is nigh. You've posted a lot of things about what you call the collapse. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because sometimes people get, I guess you could say, triggered by it and they think, oh no, you're being too pessimistic about it. But I think it also kind of ties into goths being not afraid to look into the darker elements of life, things that have to do with death and realities of pain and suffering that people go through. I think a lot of mainstream society glosses over that, or they try to put a band-aid over it. just go on business as usual, like work a job, consume. But I'm someone who likes to look deeper into it. And when I started talking about this a few years ago, I think people were a bit surprised, but I think everyone kind of gets now that things have not been, things are on a downward slide in many aspects. And again, not being overly morbid, but people can see climate change is accelerating. I think everyone has been sensing that. I think they can see the rise of authoritarianism and just the cost of living and all that. And there isn't going to be a magical solution unless the aliens somehow come and fix everything. I think realistically, whether it's faster or slower, you're just going to see an increasingly downward a descent in quality of life and even opportunities and just the way the world is going to be. I would say the 90s were probably the peak. And we still have good times now though. I think I'm very much encouraging people to do what they want to do now. The more people accept it and are aware of it, then the better they can figure out how they want to live their lives and enjoy what they can while they can.
It does feel like there was a golden age that we didn't realize was golden. I guess my last question is, where do you think art fits? What role does art have to play in your life in keeping you, you know, excited about the future or, the ability to cope with all of the wickedness and chaos that's around us?
Well, I think a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with the online world, which I understand because there's often a lot of toxicity. I mean, you've probably known this firsthand, and criticism and whatnot on the internet, but at the same time, it's a place where you can get inspiration and also create, share, and connect with other people. So that's been my focus. I've recently been doing an apartment design project, so curating art for my place, sharing how I've been decorating, and even within things that are a little dire, like we've been talking about microplastics and fast fashion, but how can you make beautiful outfits and what type of pieces can you feature that are made with natural materials and that you can rewear and restyle in different ways? So sometimes within that context of restriction, you can create. Whenever I go somewhere, I go to art museums, I try to see local art. I try to pick up pieces like the skull I just showed you that remind me of somewhere that I've traveled. So I'll be doing that when I'm in Japan and just appreciating it because I always am realizing that it could be the last time for anything. So just never take it for granted that you'll have the freedom to do these things, that you'll be healthy and able. And so make the most of it.
For sure. Like you say, I travel in part because, will my body be able to travel five,
Yeah.
10 years from now? The idea of like waiting until retirement, it's like, well, what if you don't make it that far? So I try to take advantage of the opportunities and the privileges that I have to, go out and see the world because I think the world is fascinating and I love meeting new people. And you just never know what's going to happen tomorrow, right?
Yeah, it's the Stoics, like Stoicism, they very much focus on that. You just never know what's the last time you saw this friend or went to this restaurant and then suddenly it's closed or your friend moves away, you never see them again. So you just never know. And it's good to remember that with every interaction, with every place you visit. And I agree with you. I always focus on experiences. I mean, obviously there's only so much money, but I would always never regret spending on travel and experiences while I'm there and supporting artists, supporting my friends. I'd rather put the focus on that, and who knows what can happen in the future. So this is something I will never regret.
Well, cheers to that. I agree. I have no buyer's regret from any of my travels. And
Yes.
I hope that our paths cross somewhere exciting and interesting again.
Oh, for sure. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much.